Recently, I decided to purchase a high-quality Equatorial mount for my 80mm refractor so that I could do astro imaging from the many dark sky sites we have here across the state of Utah where I live. Many reviews that I looked at spoke very highly of the HEQ5 Pro mount by Skywatcher. It's actually a mount that's been around for a whole lot of years. However, some people seem to be gravitating toward the newer EQ6-R Pro because of additional features, such as 14 pounds more carrying capacity and a quieter belt drive system. However, I also discovered in my research that the EQ6R weighs more than the HEQ5 Pro. Portability was a major consideration for me. I only needed a mount to carry my 80mm refractor, my Canon DSLR, and a 50mm guide scope. So I wasn't excited about the EQ6R Pro with its extra weight factor, but I really did like the belt drive feature. Then in my research, I ran across the Rowan belt drive upgrade kit for the HEQ5 Pro, offered by a company in the UK, and that basically sealed the deal for me. So I ordered an HEQ5 Pro mount and Rowan belt drive upgrade kit online. And they both arrived some time ago, and I've had them in storage. But spring is here, and I thought I'd get things ready for the observing season. So I've got the HEQ5 Pro on the tripod here, and I'm about ready to proceed with the belt drive modification. Before I proceeded, I wanted to have a before and after sound of the gear drive system. So let's try the RA axis first. Pretty noisy when you stop it, at least. Let's try the declination axis. Again, pretty noisy, so hopefully the belt drive upgrade will quiet that noise down quite a bit. Now, I've been mechanically inclined ever since I was a young boy. I've repaired modified motorcycles and cars. I built my own desktop computers. I worked for years in our family's construction business. And as a result of all those experiences, I'm familiar with a wide range of tools. And I really enjoy doing projects such as this. Now, that being said, I think it's kind of sad that many people shy away from projects like this because they doubt their mechanical abilities. It saddens me because many such projects are relatively straightforward and they don't require any specialty tools at all, some of them. And the benefits are saving money and having the satisfaction of having done this yourself. That's why I decided that I would go ahead and document my own upgrade procedure. Hopefully it will give others the confidence to carry out their own upgrades. Now, I need to share a couple of important cautionary notes before I get started. Number one, be forewarned that this procedure will void your manufacturer's warranty. And number two, watching my video will not guarantee your success, but hopefully it'll prove helpful. So, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, you can see that I have set up a table, portable table, a working area here, and I just wanted to point out a couple of things, kind of a procedure that I use when I'm working on projects. The first thing you can see is I've pulled the instructions out here, out of the box. I've unloaded the contents. Job number one is always going down the parts list and checking them all off, and you can see I have done that. There's nothing more frustrating than getting everything ready to work on a project and finding out that you're missing a critical part. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that I have opted, that little tool there, puller, I opted to purchase the specialty puller they had for the little gears. Not that I couldn't have got them off without it, but since that is custom made to pull the gears, I went ahead and opted for that. The other thing I did is I purchased a couple of extra drive belts just to have in my field kit if anything ever did break. They're supposed to be really, really sturdy, but hey, you know what? So I got a couple of extra belts. Now, let's come back here to the instructions for a second. One of the things that I always do before I start any project, especially these one-time projects that I'm likely not going to do again, is I read the instructions and then I reread them. I might read them 2 or 3 times. I familiarize myself with every single step so that it's not a dry run the first time that I go through it and actually perform the procedure. You can also see that I have put out a few extra tools over here. I'm probably not going to use most of these, but I might. I don't know how much grease, for example, is inside that. These mounts made in China tend to have some pretty sticky grease, and I don't know how much of it's going to be in there, but I want to be able to clean that housing out really good if it does have it. I don't know if I'll have to use any of these ties or electrical tape to tidy up the wiring inside to keep it away from the axis. I'll just have to see that when I get inside. I have a couple of automotive gauges here that are used to check spark plug gap, but they can also be used to kind of estimate the tension on the belts, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that once I get it all put together. So this is my preliminary setup here, and you can see that I have quite a large area right here. This is so that when I take off parts, I can lay them out exactly as they came off the assembly. One of the things that I have found very, very helpful is to lay things out just exactly how they go back on. And now with the advent of cell phone cameras, we can also take pictures of them. So that's just an added insurance policy when you go to put stuff back together, especially if you have to take it apart and then come back and do it another day. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the actual procedure. Okay, step number 1 is to remove the 6 screws on that plate right there. It's going to require a small Phillips screwdriver. That's the little 4-blade pointed screwdriver. So I will go ahead and take those 6 screws and the plate off. Okay, I have removed the plate. You can see the little pile of screws there. Incidentally, I know that when we put the upgrade kit on, there's going to be a spacer plate there, and those long screws there are going to end up replacing these small screws here. Otherwise, I might have even taken these screws and lined them up with the holes. I know that sounds insane, but sometimes when you're working on a project, the screws are of different lengths. I've learned things the hard way by putting the wrong screws in the wrong holes and then have to take them all out again and go over again. So there's the plate off. I wanted, as long as I had the plate off, I wanted you to see what backlash is on gears and why it affects the accuracy of guiding when you're taking long exposure astrophotos. See the play in the gears between the teeth there? Now, it doesn't seem to be a real, critical thing, but it is. That little tiny bit, when you're looking at objects in the sky that are like the, head of a pin, those little movements there, they can really affect the clarity of your images. You get blurring. And so that's the main reason that I am replacing the gears. It's not really for the sound, it's for the accuracy. I wanted to show you this. The reason I had the mineral spirits out is because I thought there might be some grease in there, and I thought that some of it might be on the housing, and you can see that that is the case. You can see the globs of grease on the gears. So when I get this all taken apart, I will clean the housing out really, really good before I proceed with the belt drive upgrade. Okay, step 2 is to remove the declination shaft cover. You can see the 2 screws on that side, and if we move around to this side, you will see that there are 3 screws on this side. So I will go ahead and take those off at this time. Okay, you can see that I have removed the cover. You can see the circuit board in there and all of the plug connections on that. And if we come over here to the workbench, you'll see that I have followed my personal procedure. There's the cover, and there are the 5 screws exactly where they were. So when I put it back together, they should go back together just fine. Okay, step 3 is to carefully unplug the deck motor lead from the circuit board.
And you can see that I'm using some little needle nose pliers to carry out that procedure. It makes it really, really easy. This is step 3 continued. It said to carefully unravel the wiring harness. You can see that it's been twisted together. I've started to unwind it, and I will have to continue here in just a moment. But I wanted to show what they had done. They had kind of braided the wires together to keep them away from the declination shaft. It's important that we note that so that when we put it back together, we will be able to duplicate that procedure. Step 4 is to remove the 3 motor plate screws that you can see that I've numbered 1, 2, 3. And I have one of the Allen wrenches. It was the second to largest one in the set that came with the Rowan kit that I have inserted into number 3. So I will go ahead and take those 3 Allen bolts out and remove the motor. Okay, you can see that I have removed the motor assembly with this wiring harness. And you can see that I've got the screws all laid out as they go back into the unit. Okay, step 5 is to loosen these 2 grub screws here, and then to remove this idler gear and shaft from the housing. So we will go ahead and do that. Okay, step 6 is to move the motor from the motor plate. And you can see that the 1, 2, 3 of the original bolt holes that secured the motor plate in the motor to the housing. And it says to make a diagram of where the wires exit. And so I have done that over here, just on a paper towel, very simply. I've gone ahead, and the diamond shape is the motor that is under that top plate. And you can see the orientation of the wires and the way they come out of that motor. And you can see that here. So I've just duplicated that here, so I will know which way to route those wires over to the circuit board when I'm done. So I'm going to go ahead and take out these 3 Allen bolts now. Okay, you can see that I have taken the plate off, and again, per my personal procedure, you can see where the plate to motor bolts go, and you can also see where the assembly to the mount bolts go. Everything is laid out exactly where it should go. Okay, step number 7 is to remove that little gear off of the motor shaft. And to do so, I ordered the optional puller from Rowan Engineering. And what it does is it just fits like that. And the principle is as you turn this against the shaft, the bottom of these, the housing around the gear will pull up and pull it off. Now, if I just try to start doing that right now, the shaft's going to turn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some needle nose pliers, and I'm going to put them across that opening to hold that puller in place so that it can't move. Now let's go ahead and extract that gear off of the end. Easy does it. This is a little precision mechanism here so that we don't want to overdo it. I can feel that it's loosening up now, and there it is. We have pulled that off. So clean that up a little bit. Okay, step number 8 is to fit this 9-tooth pulley on the motor shaft. And it says there's supposed to be a 5.5 millimeter gap. And I've cut a little piece of cardstock to 5.5, and I'll get that approximate. We'll have to line it up perfectly when we get the belt on the other pulley so that we can eyeball it and make sure that that it's parallel. So that's close enough right now. So I'll grab the Allen wrench, and I will just ever so slightly tighten these in to hold that onto the motor shaft. There we have it. Okay, step 9 is to place the idler roller pin into this. It should go in there pretty easy. I've cleaned it out with some mineral spirits, got the rest of the Loctite out. And what we want to do is kind of mocking this up back the way it goes, the plate here. We want to make sure that when the belt goes on that these will be parallel. I'll get it close now, and once the belt assembly is all on, we'll look at it a little closer. You can see right now that that's pretty close. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just tighten up the one little Allen bolt here at the top. Oops, it helps to get the right wrench. Okay. Alrighty. So now we're done with that step. Okay, step 10 is to reattach the motor plate to the motor with the Allen bolts here that I've got, the 3 that go back in the 3 holes there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Okay, this is how it should look after step 10. I have the motor plate reattached to the motor with the 3 Allen bolts. Now I'm ready to proceed. Step number 11 is to remove the drive gear, so I've got to loosen up those 2 little Allen grub screws, and I'll go ahead and loosen those up now. Okay, I've got them loosened up. Let's see if we can go ahead and pull this off. There we go. Now it looks like I'm going to have to clean some grease off there, so I'll get some of my mineral spirits and clean that off really good so that there's no grease left in there. Okay, step number 12 is to put the drive pulley on, and you can see the flat place on the shaft here. I'm going to line up one of the grub screws with that. I'm going to get 1 to 2 millimeters of play between the back of the gear and the housing, so let me go ahead and do that. Okay, step number 13 is I'm going to take the motor here and I'm going to go ahead and replace it in here and carefully route the wiring harness back around and twist it away from the declination shaft. And that'll take me just a little bit, so I'll be back shortly. Okay, final part of 13. You can see that I have replaced the 3 screws that hold the engine assembly into the mount, and you can see that that can be adjusted back and forth now. And step number 14 is going to be putting the belt on and then tensioning that properly. So we'll go ahead and get ready to do that next step. Okay, you can see that I've taken the motor plate and I've just lightly adjusted the screws that secure that motor assembly into the mount. 1, 2, and 3, just so they're barely touching. And then I have pushed the plate clear towards the drive gear so that there's plenty of room to fit the belt onto the pulley. So I'm going to put the belt on right now, and then you'll see what I mean. Step number 14, you can see that I have the drive belt around the cogged gears and the idler wheel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a screwdriver here between the housing and the motor plate, and I'm going to gently wedge it away, and you can see that the belt is tightening, and I'm going to get it approximately where I think it should be. Now, when all's said and done, there should be 2 millimeters of play as you push up here on the belt. And it said push lightly. So obviously, if I push really hard, I could push those together up there, but that's not the spec. It's to push lightly. Now, I have an automotive spark plug gap checker here, and you can see 2.03 millimeters, so it's approximately 2 millimeters. And I can hold that up so that one edge of that is on the bottom, and then push that belt until that bottom edge is on top. And so I'm going to do that quickly. Okay, step 14. I've gone ahead and I've tensioned the belt so that there's about 2 millimeters of free play as I push it up on the long part between the idler wheel. And I wanted to make sure that it worked before I proceeded. And you can see how quiet it is compared to before. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with that. And before I move on, I did want to point out one thing. As I worked on the wiring here, I used some electrical tape on the wiring harness of the motor so that it would hold all the wires together as I came up and keep it away from this declination shaft here. You can also see I've used a couple of zip ties to pull all those wires away from that declination shaft. I'm going to have to do a little work over here with the red wire you see, and you can see I've already undone the motor for the right ascension shaft here as long as I'm here. So now what I've got to do is I've got to come back here to the instructions as it says and repeat the above steps for the RA motor, steps 3 through 14. And I'm not going to bore everybody with going through the exact same procedures because they are the exact same. You can see that the motor assemblies are pretty much the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and perform the same 3 through 14 steps on the right ascension axis as I did for the declination axis. And when I'm done, I will show you a demonstration of how that sounds different as well. So I'll go ahead and proceed with that, and then I'll be back. Okay, as you can see, I'm back at step 14 with the RA drive. I've got it all tightened up. Big cautionary note here. Make sure that you tighten that belt appropriately per the instructions to the 2 millimeters of play. See how close those belts come together on the idler wheel there? If it's loose, the cogs are going to interfere with each other and it'll throw the belt off very quickly, I'm quite sure. Now let's see how it works. Huge improvement over the stock one. I wanted to show you quickly the wiring. As you can see, I have wrapped the wiring harness in electrical tape. I just took regular width electrical tape, split it in half, and wrapped it. You can see how it allowed me to mold the wires away from the declination shaft. And I also routed that red wire that's right next door that was rubbing against the declination shaft in the stock mount. It's now behind the wiring harness of the RA drive, so you can see the clearance now between the deck shaft. All the way down now, everything is apart from the declination shaft, so I'm not going to have any rubbing wires and shorts down the road. So back to step 14. We're all finished with both of these drives, and now it will be time to put the thing back together, the cover. Step number 15. We need to replace the declination shaft cover with the 5 little Phillips screws. And again, that goes right up there over the declination shaft. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I have the declination shaft back on, and I have just used 2 of the bolts provided in the kit to position the plastic spacer plate onto the mount so that you can see how that looks before I put the cover on. The belt drive system pulleys stick out further than the gear drive did, and so they machined this plastic spacer plate here to make up for that difference. So what I'm going to do now is I will take the cover here, and you can see that I've put a little sticker on there, Rowan belt drive, to show that it's got the belt drive system inside. And I will take these remaining bolts and I'll put them through the cover and then put them through the spacer and tighten the cover assembly down. Okay, there it is. Everything's all back together. The mount's ready to go. Just a demonstration here as to how it sounds now that it's all put back together. Let's do the declination axis. Wow, I cannot believe the difference in how it sounds, and the precision is, that's a whole nother issue there. And as I mentioned earlier, that's the real important issue when it comes to astrophotography. Here's the right ascension axis. Wow, again, pretty quiet with the school bus going by my house out there. Wow, that's amazing. What an incredible difference that makes. It's going to be great when it comes to astro imaging. Now, before I wrap this video up, I want to just do a little bit of a confessional here. I ran into a couple of issues with this, and so those of you who are new to modifying things, don't feel like you're the Lone Ranger if you run into a little hitch here or there. The first thing that I ran into was I was pulling off one of the gears, and at the factory they had tightened it on too strongly with the little Allen grub screw, and they had stripped the Allen keyway out. And so an Allen wrench wasn't going to work. And so I had to take one of my little micro screwdrivers that I use for electronics and working on small little things. And I lightly tapped that into the Allen keyway and used some pliers and was able to snap that little grub screw out. The second challenge I ran into, as I mentioned earlier, was the wiring hodgepodge inside of the declination housing. Some of it was actually rubbing against the declination shaft, and if I had gone ahead and used this in stock form, sooner or later some of the cladding on that wiring might have worn through and caused a short, and that could have been serious, especially when it comes to my circuit board. It might have shorted stuff out there. So I tidied up all the wiring inside with some electrical tape and some zip ties, and now everything is completely clear of the declination shaft, so more peace of mind there. Now, I'd like to say something to those of you who may be thinking, yeah, maybe I ought to try this, or I don't really know whether I should. I've been a life coach now for many, many years, and I can tell you from experience that the big killer of dreams in this world is fear. Fear keeps people from using their native abilities, their talents, as I call it, their greatness. And every human being comes with a whole lot of greatness inside of them. But you have to get past fear if you're ever going to discover what you really can do. And so what I would recommend to all of you folks is just go for it. Jump in with both feet and give it a whirl. And you just might surprise yourself. The satisfaction of having done something like this yourself, it can last a long time. So there's my little motivational speech at the end of this. Clear skies, everybody.